Someday, the dragons will return. My brother Daeron dreamed of it, and King Aerys read it in a prophecy. Maybe it will be my egg that hatches. That would be splendid. Aegon Targaryen, to Duncan the Tall. A Night at the Seven Kingdoms. The Mystery Night. Dragon eggs are an extremely important part of A Song of Ice and Fire, not just because of the role of dragons in the wider history and lore of the main book series, but what they represent for House Targaryen. After the Doom of Valyria, just over a century before Aegon's conquest, it seems the only dragons left in the world were the 5 Targaryen dragons Aenar the Exile had brought to Dragonstone when he relocated House Targaryen before the Doom. So the dragons themselves gave House Targaryen an unimaginable amount of power and influence. The few dragon eggs that now also existed were just as unimaginably valuable. Dragons were instrumental in Aegon's conquest and the power structure of Westeros for 129 years. While there was some close calls, such as the Faith Militant Uprising in 42 AC, under the indecisive rule of King Aenys, it was arguably dragons that restored order as soon as there was a king like Maelor who had the willingness to use the dragons to their fullest extent. Whenever House Targaryen was attacked, such as during the Fourth Dornish War in 83 AC, it was dragons that ended it in a single afternoon. Even in instances where dragons were not effective, the way they had been for the rest of Aegon's conquest during the First Dornish War, the devastation they created cannot be comprehended. While both House Targaryen and Dorne took damaging losses during that first war, Dorne itself was left a smoking hellhole. But what the Dornish War shows us is how vulnerable House Targaryen could be if they did not have access to dragons. If you take a look at the centuries of civil war during the Blackfyre rebellions after the Dance of the Dragons, it shows just how open to attack the crown had become. House Targaryen was not the same house it was before the dance. While they still had huge amounts of power, they were a shadow of their former selves without the security of dragons. They could not go unquestioned anymore, and they were much more beholden to their lords. In this now dragonless world, the remaining unhatched dragon eggs became an important symbol of Targaryen power, reminding people they were in fact the blood of old Valyria. They were a glimmer of hope that maybe one day House Targaryen might return to its former glory. So given how important symbolically dragon eggs became post-dance, it's really quite surprising just how many Targaryen dragon eggs went missing or were unaccounted for. In this video, we're going to take a look at all of the missing Targaryen dragon eggs, speculate what could have happened to them, and the impact this could have on the history and lore, and maybe even the story going forward. Fire and blood were the words of House Targaryen, but Dunk once heard Sir Arlen say Aegon's should have been, "Wash her, and bring her to my bed." The thoughts of Sir Duncan the Tall. A Night at the Seven Kingdoms, the Mystery Night. King Aegon IV, better known as Aegon the Unworthy, is deserving of that title for many reasons, being among the worst kings Westeros had ever seen. With other kings often marked down as bad, such as Maelor the Cruel, you can find some way to view their reign in a more positive light. This is not the case for King Aegon IV. For many, he symbolises the rot that had set in within House Targaryen. He was known to give lavish gifts of gold, lands and titles to lords, whose wives and daughters he wished to bed. There is one occasion where his former currency and payment was a dragon egg, something that was becoming increasingly prized and rare as we get further away from the death of the last dragon. Aegon is said to have gifted a Lord Butterwell a dragon egg after guesting in his castle for a night, an extremely valuable gift for seemingly very little. If tales are to be believed, he gifted the egg to Lord Butterwell for access to his 3 maiden daughters, whom he impregnated in that single night. For many, it was abhorrent that Aegon had used a dragon egg for such a purpose, for something so sordid. The egg became a prized possession for the Butterwells until 212 AC. The recently widowed Lord Ambrose Butterwell, the grandson of the Lord gifted the dragon egg, hosted a wedding tourney at White Walls Castle to celebrate his marriage to a daughter of House Frey. But the tourney was also secretly an attempt to bring about a second Blackfyre rebellion in the name of Daemon II Blackfyre. The winner of the tourney was supposed to receive the dragon egg that Ambrose's grandfather had been gifted by Aegon IV. However, the egg was stolen from White Walls before it could be awarded. We don't know for certain what happened to this egg. We do find some implication of its fate in the third Knight of the Seven Kingdoms novella, The Mystery Knight, where Bloodraven states that a small person, a child or dwarf, climbed up the privy shaft of the castle and stole the egg from Butterwell's room. While not expressly stated, it suggested that it was under the instruction of Bloodraven himself. Thus, he in theory now has possession of the dragon egg, possibly returning it, but what we cannot say for sure is if Bloodraven was behind the theft, he could very well have kept the egg for himself. There is one very tinfoil fan theory, very few bits of tangible evidence, that suggests Bloodraven kept the egg and took it beyond the wall with him after deserting the Night's Watch, and that this egg is still in his possession. Some take this theory even further, believing that the egg will hatch and Bran will warg the dragon. But I personally don't put too much stock in either of these ideas, as cool as they actually sound. You shall receive the same terms you gave my nephew Maelor, Daeron Targaryen, to Lady Caswell, Fire and Blood, the Dying of the Dragons. The Dance of the Dragons presents us with three potential cases of missing or unaccounted for dragon eggs, one being more likely a legend than others, with the other two much more interesting mysteries, or maybe even overlooked parts of the world lore. The second son of Rhaenyra Targaryen and Daemon Targaryen, Viserys, like most Targaryen princes, was given a cradle egg. While the egg did not hatch as a babe, it is said that he kept the egg with him constantly. When he was captured during the Battle of the Gullet by ships from the Three Daughters, loyal to the Greens, Viserys smartly hid the egg to conceal his identity until his ruse was discovered. A Taroshi captain brought Viserys to Shakaro Lothar, the Triarchy's admiral. Viserys' fate through the remainder of the dance was unknown to his family, who believed he died during the battle, but Viserys in fact ended up in Lys under the stewardship of Magister Bambario Bazzani. After the Magister died in debt, Viserys passed into the custody of the wealthy Roger banking family, whose banks at this time was as powerful as the Iron Bank of Bravos. Viserys was wed to the family's youngest daughter, Lara, despite being 7 years his senior. Viserys would later return and reunite with his elder brother, Aegon, a few years later, when he returned to Westeros thanks to Alan Velaryon. For a long time, Viserys' egg was counted among the missing, until the publication of Fire and Blood greatly fleshed out the reign of King Aegon III. Viserys did indeed still have his dragon egg as an adult, meaning he was allowed to keep it despite its sheer value, while a captive in Lys. But in 135 AC, it was sent away from King's Landing to Dragonstone by order of the king, after a monstrous worm that hatched from Laena Velaryon's egg harmed the babe. It's unclear what actually happened to Viserys' egg after this, but it was presumed it may have been one of the small number of remaining eggs other Targaryens would later try and hatch in the years after the dance. Another more vague missing dragon egg is the one that belonged to Prince Maelor Targaryen, the second son of King Aegon II. When Maelor was sent from King's Landing under the protection of Sir Rickard Thorne of the Kingsguard, just before the fall of King's Landing to Rhaenyra, he was also sent with his cradle egg. After Maelor's brutal death at Bitterbridge on the way to Old Town, the egg found its way into the possession of Lady Caswell, who then had the egg sent to Ormond Hightower, who was leading the Green Army up from Old Town. We don't actually know what happened to the egg, which is complicated more so when you consider Ormond never made it to King's Landing, and all of the drama that happened after, such as Tumbleton. It would have been very easy to have lost track of the egg in all of this chaos, and we have no real idea of what happened to it. What are they? Dragon eggs. From the Shadowlands beyond the Shy, the eons have turned them to stone, yet they still burn bright with beauty. I shall treasure them always. Daenerys Targaryen and Magister Ilario Mopatis, A Game of Thrones Chapter 11, Daenerys 2. Arguably, the most iconic missing dragon eggs in A Song of Ice and Fire are those stolen by Elissa Farman during the early reign of King Jaehaerys I. The eggs are very much properly missing. It's not just history lost track of them. More so, for a very long time, no one in the world had a clue where they were, and it's only with the publication of Fire and Blood and comments from George R. R. Martin we can piece together what happened. Elissa Farman was a favourite and very close friend of Rhaena Targaryen during the early reign of King Jaehaerys I. Elissa was a renowned sailor and loved adventure. After her relationship with Rhaena began to sour, she asked to leave Dragonstone, which Rhaena accepted stone-faced. Now, for the relevant part for this video. When Elissa left Dragonstone, she discreetly stole 3 dragon eggs from the hatcheries inside the Dragonmont. When she reached Braavos, she sold the dragon eggs to the Sea Lord for a huge sum of gold she used to finance the building of a grand new ship, which she would use to try and sail across the Sunset Sea west of Westeros. The news about the theft was alarming to King Jaehaerys. If these eggs were to hatch, there would be other dragon lords in the world that were not of House Targaryen. Rewards were offered for rumours of the location of the dragon eggs, but every whisper proved worthless. By 56 AC, Jaehaerys suspected the dragon eggs had played a part in the financing of Elissa's ship, but the Iron Bank of Braavos denied it all. In 57 AC, the newly appointed Hand of the King, Septon Barth, travelled to Braavos in person and confronted the Sea Lord about the eggs, warning that Jaehaerys would bring destruction upon Braavos should these eggs hatch. The Sea Lord denied having purchased any eggs and claimed that an unhatched dragon egg was nothing more than pretty stones. Barth eventually returned to King's Landing without the eggs, but with the Crown's entire loan from the Iron Bank of Braavos forgiven. Now officially the eggs are missing, but we may have an answer as to their fate. There is a lot of evidence that alludes to the fact that these eggs are the very same Daenerys is given during a Game of Thrones that hatch on Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. While this is still not strictly canon, it has been widely accepted by fans given the sheer level of evidence and comments from George R.R. Martin regarding it. First off, according to Archmaester Bennifer, when trying to calm Jaehaerys' concerns about the eggs hatching, he says that the eggs would most likely turn to stone while away from the heat of Dragonstone. Daenerys' eggs were stone when they were first given to her. There is also then Jaehaerys' comment that the petrified dragon eggs could end up in the possession of a Pentoshi spicemonger, which coincidentally, Ilario Mapatis is a Pentoshi merchant who deals in spices among other luxuries, Ilario being the man who gifted Daenerys the eggs. While unconfirmed in Fire and Blood, it's very likely that Dreamfire is the dragon who laid the eggs. Some thus argue this hints towards the ritual through which Daenerys managed to hatch them, involving dragon dreams and the fire of Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, hence the name Dreamfire. The first promotional material for Fire and Blood, which described some of the things that would happen in Fire and Blood, stated the question of the origin of Daenerys' 3 dragon eggs would be answered in the book, with the tale of Elissa Farman being the only part of Fire and Blood that could be referring to. There is a few issues with this theory, however, despite how much fans accept it, and George R. R. Martin's own suggestions. Ilario Mapatis states in the text, when he gives Daenerys the dragon eggs, they are from the Shadowlands beyond the Shy by the Shadow, and thousands of years old. If they are Elissa Farman's stolen dragon eggs, it's unknown how the eggs might have gotten from Braavos all the way to the lands beyond the Shy. Not just the Shy, beyond the Shy, and then back to the free cities, while losing their provenance, as Ilario would have surely have told Daenerys if they were in fact really Targaryen dragon eggs, if he knew, as this would have made them an even more special gift and much more personal. However, some believe the answer is much more simple, that it's possible that the person who sold the eggs to Ilario lied about their origin, or was truly convinced that they came from further east. There are some real-world issues as well that might factor into this. Fire and Blood, where Elissa Farman was introduced, was published in 2018. Thus it's very possible that George R. R. Martin had not come up with the idea of the egg theft yet when he wrote A Game of Thrones, which was published in 1996. That may explain the apparent inconsistency. While the promo for Fire and Blood did state we would get an answer about Daenerys' dragon eggs, the actual printed book jacket copy of Fire and Blood makes no mention of the eggs at all, and at the end of the day, the book is the core source here. Further to this, in a blog post about Fire and Blood during its release, When asked about Daenerys' eggs by fans, George R. R. Martin said the promotional text did not come from him, even though he confirmed the book suggests possible answers about the matter. So it's up to you where you fall on this matter. I think the sheer amount of evidence for the stolen eggs becoming Dany's dragons is strong, plus George's coy comments about them in his blog. He's made several other similar claims over the years as well, at conventions and in interviews. So I think it's as close as we will get to an official answer. But unless it's in print or George expressly confirms it, Elissa Farman's stolen eggs could be considered missing. The talk of stone dragons. Madness. I tell you, sheer madness. Did we learn nothing from Aery and Brightflame? From the Nine Mages? From the Alchemists? Did we learn nothing from Summerhall? No good has ever come of these dreams of dragons. I told Axel as much. Alistair Florent, to Davos Seaworth, A Storm of Swords, Chapter 25, Davos 3. The last properly missing dragon eggs comes as a result of the tragedy at Summerhall that killed King Aegon V and most of the royal family when the Targaryen palace in the Dornish Marches burnt down during a celebration for the coming birth of Aegon's first great-grandson, Rhaegar Targaryen. The exact cause of the fire and how events actually transpired is not fully known, but it seems to have involved wildfire. It is believed it was connected with King Aegon's desire to restore dragons to the Seven Kingdoms. We know he was always fascinated with dragons, and during the last years of his reign he was consumed by a search for ancient lore about dragon breeding from old Valyria, and it was said he even commissioned journeys to places as far away as Asshai, with the hopes of finding texts and knowledge that had not been preserved in Westeros. It appears that Aegon was using this gathering of his family as an excuse to try and hatch dragons. He brought 7 dragon eggs to Summerhall in honour of the 7 gods, as well as pyromancers from the Guild of Alchemists, who are of course famous for the production of wildfire. From the fragments of information we have about the fire, it seems that Aegon ignored the advice of his septons and maesters and tried to hatch the 7 eggs using wildfire, causing a blaze that quickly got out of control, burning down the palace and taking the lives of most of House Targaryen in the process. The event damaged House Targaryen greatly due to how few Targaryens remain, and was one of several key events that laid the groundwork for Robert's Rebellion and the downfall of House Targaryen. Needless to say, the eggs did not hatch, and we have no idea what actually happened to them. We have no record of them being recovered from the ashes of Summerhall, so it may be that the wildfire destroyed them. But we have no idea how wildfire could interact with dragon eggs or a living dragon, and if it has the power to do this. But Summerhall does leave us with 7 dragon eggs, unaccounted for. The reality is, because the way history has been recorded, there are likely dozens of missing Targaryen dragon eggs out there. There were many cradle eggs that did not hatch, including several post-Dance of the Dragons. It's likely they would have been returned to Dragonstone, or maybe given to other members of House Targaryen over the centuries. What I do find odd, however, is given how immensely valuable dragon eggs are, there's not more of them being traded among the rich. There are tales that suggest there's a large hoard of unhatched eggs somewhere on Dragonstone, which makes sense given how long dragons had lived there. But I find it odd, in the decade that Stannis was Lord of the Island, this apparent cache of eggs was never found, or even, in need of gold, there was no effort by Robert Baratheon to find and sell any remaining Targaryen eggs. Even if we take a step away from the Targaryen dragon eggs, there's likely random clutches of eggs all over the old Valyrian Empire that dragons have been laying for centuries, and likely hundreds in the ruins of old Valyria itself, or even the Shadowlands beyond the Shire.